Hey guys, it's Emanuel here. Excited to continue this reading of the most amazing book ever. I'm having a blast reading it. I feel like I'm getting a deja vu of reading the emotion code again. So if I'm a little giddy, I'm sorry, but it's enjoyable to read something else that Brad wrote. And I'm excited too because I have talked to him recently. So there's going to be an interview with him and I again now that his book is released. So stay tuned to that. If you have any questions for him, it's very simple. I'll be making a post on our social media platform. Again, I probably repeat 1,000 times, but it's haveempathyandlove.com, and go to the heal section there. And I'll probably be posting it somewhere in the next few days when I get back from, or when he gets back with me, and he gets a date. We have a date together, and then basically we'll be at the podcast. And what I'm going to plan to do is, you guys probably have a ton of questions for him. So I'm going to basically gather a ton of questions, maybe like 20 to 30 questions for him. And we're gonna have an amazing 2-hour, maybe 1 hour and a half podcast. And you guys get your questions answered. I'll even put your name out there so you can be on the YouTube video. So just get ready for that. But you have to be on Heal to do that. I'll be posting it everywhere on my social media platforms. But basically, unless you're in Heal, you don't qualify to get a question there. So I can put it in a bucket and I'll just see which ones we're going to choose. Okay, so we are reading pages 30 to 40, and so I went to page 32. So if you look here, basically this page is all about like quantum mechanics and quantum energies, and he talks about Max Planck, the originator of the quantum theory. So when I'm reading all this stuff, here's what's really interesting is that if you belong to a church or if you belong to a faith, one thing that's very, very important is to decipher what's like the milk and the meat. You know, they call it the milk of the gospel and the meat of the gospel, right? And one of the things you don't want to do, and this is what happens sometimes, I don't know why we do this, but when we get some really good information about quantum physics and all stuff like that, we think in our minds that everybody wants to hear about it. Now, me as a practitioner, I love it. I could eat this stuff all day. But just know that just because you're getting more information about the body code, you have to be very careful, is you don't want to regurgitate some of this complicated word acrobats with people that are just looking to get some healing done. They just want to know that you release trapped emotions, and they don't want to go into quantum entanglement or non-locality and different things like that. So just be very careful with your audience, and who you're talking to is very, very important. So if you're a practitioner, don't go into quantum entanglement unless they ask about it, you know? And if you're a client, just know that your practitioner may know some of that stuff, but the more important thing that they do need to know is how to muscle test and how to send you an email with the notes. That's really the only thing that's very important, is they really know how to muscle test. And if they know how to do that, they can probably do the body code really amazing. And so, but yeah, so I always talk about it. Just make sure you're very aware of the milk and the meat. Now, when I do talk to people about the body code, I try to keep it very simple. When I meet with someone brand new, I try to just give them an overview. Don't make your overview longer than 5 minutes. You know, just keep it short. Some of you guys go like 20 minutes long. I try to just go 5 minutes. Hey, listen, Dr. Brad was a chiropractor, and you can copy anything that I say here. Feel free to just use it, take it, pause this video, and use it for yourself. That's totally fine. But what I do when I meet with a new client is I give my 30-minute talk about myself. And I even make a joke about it. I always say it. I always go, hey, I'm going to talk about myself for 30 seconds, a minute, and then I'll never talk about myself ever again. I say that all the time because it's not about me during a session. It's about the person that's looking for help, right? So I want to get out of the way as quickly as possible. But it is good to have a little introduction, like, how did you get introduced to it? It's a great thing. When did you get your first testimonial? How did you get introduced to it? And why did you decide to help people? Just keep it super short. Then when it comes to, what is the emotion code? I say, sometimes I try to throw out some words like, have you heard of Reiki healing or Theta healing or acupuncture? Have you heard? Those are all like, basically Eastern different things, not Western, it's Eastern. And the emotion code's kind of in there. So I kind of like throw the emotion code with these other modalities, maybe something that they're familiar with. You always want to build a bridge with people. You don't want to like separate yourself from people. You want to say like, what are you familiar with? Let's connect with that with the body code. And then basically what I say is Dr. Brad was a chiropractor for 20 years. I've literally memorized this in my head. I just talked about Dr. Brad was a chiropractor. Are you familiar with chiropractors? Yes. So he was always he was always asking for help to help out other clients. He'd always do that before he would meet with people. And through that mechanism of connecting with above, he got more downloads of how the body really works. And what I used to think is that my brain produces all the emotions, but really our organs and glands are producing emotions as well. So the organ, like for example, liver, I always use the liver. Liver produces emotions like anger, bitterness, guilt, hatred, resentment. And so if you have a very fatty liver, or you're drinking too much caffeine or drinking too much alcohol, then you're probably producing readily these emotions: anger, bitterness, guilt, hatred, resentment. This is what I'm telling a new person. Notice I didn't go into quantum entanglement. I try to keep it very simple. So through muscle testing, so you're producing these emotional energies, and they're kind of like leaving your body, like a ball of energy is leaving your body. It happens throughout the day. The problem is that these emotions, if they're very concentrated or very strong, sometimes they don't process properly, or maybe you're in an environment that don't allow you to process your emotions. And children should be seen, not heard. And all of a sudden, these energies get stuck in the body. They're called trapped emotions. And through muscle testing, pushing down on your arm, I always tell them, if you were here in person, I'll be pushing down on your arm, asking you questions. And if it's strong, it means yes. If it's no, it means weak. And I would use a magnet on your back. It's this thing called the governing meridian. It's like a line, this energetic line that goes from your bottom of your nose to all the way to the back of your spine. I would rub a magnet on it with the intention to remove the energy, and then it'd be gone. That's an overview of the emotion code. And it helps out with emotional imbalances, physical imbalances, and spiritual imbalances. So, and then I get right to it. You see how that was very, very simple? Feel free to, again, rewind this. And if you're like, wow, that's a really great introduction to it, feel free to use it. Again, like I just copied what Dr. Brad has said and try to make it as condensed as possible, and try not to make it too complicated, make it the milk, right? Okay, so now back to page 33. It talks about on the, if you look at, I think it's the fourth paragraph, it says something to the extent of like, under the existing mechanistic perspective, remedies that have been used successfully for thousands of years were effectively set aside and essentially ignored by Western medicine. If doctors and scientists couldn't fit those concepts into the frames of reality, then those ideas were seen as best as placebos, which there's nothing wrong with the placebo effect. It gets kind of a bad rap, but placebo is good. And they were discredited and dismissed. So one of the things that I've noticed here is the reason why they were ignored by Western medicine, in my opinion, is because, and Dr. Brad probably agrees this too, is that there's really, people are always looking for research papers, white papers, blindfold studies, And what's interesting is, just to let you know kind of a little backstory, is I was talking to Brad when he was at an event once, and I was telling him how my dad is an oncologist. And I called my dad to be like, what? I know you've experienced the body code, Father, after a year. What would make this more reputable? What would make this more mainstream? And my dad quickly answered and says, he needs some research papers, white papers, to show this is where they were before with this is where they are now. And just, over and over and over again, do a ton of studies. And I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, the first emotion code version didn't have that. So we need to do something. And I told Brad this, and Brad's like, yeah, you're right, we do need papers. And what's really interesting is I had a client that her husband was a PTSD veteran that I used to work on before. And what happened is I told him, I said, I know a lady who used to study other PTSD veterans. Like, all she would do is do clinical trials with them all the time. If you'd like, I'd give you her phone number and you can reach out to her. Guess what he did? Brad reached out to her and said, let's get some PTSD people and let's do some studies on them, because you're very good at keeping record. And that is, if you go in the emotion code book, that's actually her turning in that paperwork. So we do have some studies with improvement of removing people's heart walls that improve PTSD. Now that's obviously the first step. We could do way more studies on how it can help out with anxiety or how it can help out with depression, but they just happened to do a study on PTSD. So that's kind of a little backstory on that. But if you do look at the second version of the emotion code book, they do have that there, okay? Also interesting enough, he actually mentions in the second to last paragraph on page 33, it says, for example, when your grandmother checked into the hospital with COVID-19, were there any alternative remedies recommended or tried or even thought of by Western trained doctors? And the answer is no, right? But here's what's interesting, guys. If you guys have somebody who's dealing with COVID-19 or some illness or whatever, that doesn't mean you can't interrupt them and help them out. So for example, I had a client who their mother was in people are having a lot of heart issues with COVID. And what's interesting is my client's mother-in-law was in the hospital having heart issues. They even looked at her x-ray, said there's a valve that's not doing well. They need to do a surgery. She thought she was gonna die. She was literally dying in the hospital. And guess who came to the rescue? I worked on her, and it was really beautiful. A day later, or a couple of days later, they did an x-ray on her, and the x-ray used to show this valve issue. All of a sudden, it wasn't there anymore. They're like, what did you do? All of a sudden, her energy was coming back. I worked on her removing a viral infection energetically, and I was working on her, and literally she was out of the hospital within 3 or 4 days, and it was miraculous. Like the doctors were dumbfounded. What the x-rays looked totally different, and the body could heal itself. That's the reality of it. So don't give up on the fact that doctors don't provide Eastern energy healing and different things. You could be that person. Maybe you're the one that can offer help. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Also, on a very super random note that you guys probably are like, why is he mentioning this? On page 34, on the first paragraph, it says the collapsing of the wave function, non-locality. This is what I was talking about, these very complicated terms. Non-locality, that was actually one of the bands that I used to play in. That's super random note. I used to be a singer for a band, and non-locality was one of the names of them. And I didn't come up with the name. I remember it was I believe it was the bass player or the drummer who did. And I asked him, like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, like, something's happening over here is also happening somewhere else. It's a really cool quantum physics theory. And it's just kind of ironic that now non-locality is a part of my life. Like, what I'm doing and what we're doing, what you're doing is has that involved. So it's interesting. You might have some clues in your life, little things, little spider web moments that are kind of like slowly grafting your path, maybe in your mission. And so it's kind of cool. Again, always reflect back. Maybe somehow you were led to this video. It's kind of interesting to see what brought you here. Maybe you're a practitioner. What brought you to become a practitioner? The little spider webs that kind of led you here. Okay, so the next thing is, okay. I believe this is the third paragraph. Of course, not all issues are quickly remedied. Some can take many weeks, even months to address. Imbalances are often layered, may require a specific sequence of issues to be addressed over time, much like peeling an onion one layer after another. I want to make a comment on this. Here's one of the major frustrations of clients, and practitioners should know this too. After 9 years of doing this, sometimes what you'll see is, I've noticed Brad will be on stage and he'll be muscle testing to see who he should work with. What I've noticed is that they're kind of looking for people that have probably a very quick way to heal, maybe remove 2 or 3 things, and then boom, they're done. And then what it might do is set us up all for failure, because we're just like, wow, they did it in one session, or they did it in just 4 different things. Sometimes it's like that. I've had many clients where I remove 2 or 3 things and they're fine to go. But it's not always the case. Sometimes there's multiple layers. Brad would say, you move the combination lock. It's like click, 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 click. That's one session, click, 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 another session, click, 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 and then boom, everything kind of works out. Kind of with a fibromyalgia client that I had, I didn't really see too much improvement the first 2 sessions for some reason, but then the third one just unlocked everything, and then she was able to lower down her pain from like a 9 to a 2 for her whole entire body. So just know, when you do see people do live sessions, especially Discover Healing Team, just don't get discouraged if you go like, wow, that was only one trapped emotion, all the pain gone. That is that does happen, but it's like a diamond in the rough, you know. Usually it takes multiple sessions, and there's nothing wrong with your muscle testing. It's like they're kind of looking for someone that either they've worked on before or it's a very quick fix, and their intuition kind of like taps into them. So that's one thing I want to share with you guys. That way you guys don't get disappointed. Let's go to page 35. It says, clearing childhood abuse. There's a really great paragraph there that talks about somebody losing pain and things like that. I wanted to mention with you guys that there was this girl that I worked with about, I don't know, she was kind of young, 19, probably 5 years ago. And it was really interesting. Childhood trauma does cause adult diseases. I'll say that again. Childhood trauma typically does cause adult disease. And I worked with a 19-year-old, and she had dyslexia. And I literally remember working on her where there was some spiritual, physical disconnections of parts of her brain. There was a physical disconnection of two different parts of her brain, the temporal lobe and this other lobe. And in one session, see, this is one of those like kind of like, whoa. In one session, she was able to read that day. The next day she read, the next day she read, and she couldn't believe it. You know, she said, wait a minute, I'm going to read with small print. It worked. I'm going to read in the dark where it's barely light. It worked. You know, she was just kind of skeptical about it. She didn't believe it because this was her first time reading. But it was interesting that every time I found a trauma, it was like the 2 times that her father very severely abused her, unfortunately. And I was able to find those ages, age 9, age 6, and she remembers like, oh, this is when he threw me into a closet, or this is when he did this. And it was interesting. Parts of her brain started to disconnect, and now she's able to speak again. So in congruence with the fact that I do believe childhood trauma kind of sets you up for adult symptoms. So I totally agree with this page 35 thing here. Page 36, interesting thing, he starts making some relations to the energy body or the spirit, and he goes into some beautiful philosophies on the spirit. One story that he mentioned here one time at an event was that there was an airplane accident, and he said that this guy survived, and he was looking at his vision, I think he had discernment where he could see spirits, or I don't know if he just saw it for the first time. I don't remember that part of the story. But this huge airplane crashed. A lot of people were dead. But he said that the people that were dead in the seats, let's say they were lying down, their heads were down, he said that he saw literally spirits leaving their body. But he saw it really interesting that some of them were like darker hue and color, some of them were lighter, and some whatever. And Brad talks about how he believes that it's people who have worked on themselves, like have done energy healing for themselves, or did meditation, or just stayed more with the light, or followed the light of Christ more, that it seemed like their spirit was brighter, and other stuff had more like muck on it, And so it's really interesting that this work, I truly believe, is a form of refinement for mind, body, and spirit. And also, something that if you don't know this, there's a great book called Understanding the Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins, a book I highly, highly recommend. I would say it's in my top 5: Bible, Emotion Code, Understanding the Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins. And it talks about how we're all in different levels, from 0 to 1,000. And the world is around 100 to 250. It's kind of low frequency Earth right now. But as you do these energy healing sessions, check yourself on what level you're at when you start and what level you're at when you're done. It's really interesting. You actually move up the levels of map of consciousness. And as you do that, you increase your frequency. And the more higher level you are, the more peace you have, the more love you have for society, the more connected you feel. So there is an end game. The goal would be like, how can we get to 700 to 1,000? Those enlightened beings up there, they really, whatever they did, whatever training they did, whatever meditations they did, they got to the point where they saw life differently. And they were seeking for light, and they were like hungry for, as in the scriptures say, you thirst and you hunger for righteousness. And they did it consistently over periods of time to where the body can handle that. It created a frame body that enabled them to enlighten themselves with the power of the Creator. And so there is kind of an end game, So it's kind of like emotion code, body code is great to work on, but just know what's the end game. The end game is to become a being of love, a being of unconditional love, and to have full faith, full hope, full charity. That would be great. A new creature in Christ, as the scriptures would call it. That's really the goal. And I really feel like emotion code can play a really big part in that. Okay, so we're going to go to we're running a little bit on time here. Let's go to page 38. Your truest identity. This is so interesting. I actually made a video, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but read the Your Truest Identity. And if you loved it, I loved it too. But I made a video that kind of goes along with this a long time ago. And but I made it kind of very theatrical. So it's called The Inside Divide. If you want to write this down, there's a YouTube video. It's called Inside Divide, Identity Seen with Emanuel Zevallos, CECP, CBCP, with obviously body code, emotion code. But it's called Inside Divide, Identity Seen with Emanuel Zevallos. Look for that on YouTube. I think you'll love it. I would love your feedback on it once you watch it. It took a lot of footage to make it. It wasn't easy at all. But it was filmed at my house, my old place. Actually, it was my brother-in-law's house. And I was skateboarding in it. I mean, it's really interesting. And I talk about like what is our true identity, and he goes into it. I didn't know he was going to do this, so it's kind of neat. The last thing is this, page 40 on the second paragraph. The bulk of your intelligence is subconscious. So the only thing that I want to add to that too is the conscious brain is also not as powerful as the subconscious, but here's a little cool tip. If you look in the body code, there's a broadcast. You can do broadcast messages, right? You can replace it and you insert a new one. You kind of ask the higher self of that person, what do you want to place here? And you put it on there for them. You say, is that okay with you? Do you want to change it a little bit? But your higher self loves this new message, and you put it out there, and now they're putting out a different frequency to people instead of like hate me or you don't like me, whatever, or don't like me or abuse me. And what's interesting is that you can, I sometimes muscle test to see if they need to meditate on this new installed broadcast message. Like let's say it's like, love me unconditionally. They may not consciously feel comfortable with that. Their subconscious is, like it's ready to go. The conscious brain's like, whoa, what? You just changed my shirt? What's going on here? You changed my broadcast. So sometimes you might want to muscle test how long they should do like maybe a small meditation where they're saying that word to themselves. And sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 3 weeks. Oh no, look, it's only 2 weeks. So okay, so 2 weeks of just 14 days of just saying that consciously, that also helps out. One of my practitioners that worked on me, she told me that. She said, hey, this one's kind of like, you want to make sure your conscious brain catches up to your subconscious. You might need to repeat this to yourself for a little time. Now they're matching together. So hopefully you enjoyed this section here where we talk about page 30 to 40. And feel free to comment below, again, what was your favorite part between these pages? Or maybe what was your favorite tip that I shared if you want to add something to it. I know I can learn a lot from you guys as well. But I just want to keep adding value, anything that I can do that kind of give you perspective or experience from my 9 years. I'm looking forward for you guys to succeed, to do a lot better. If you're a client, I hope that you get more information than just this book as well. So, and again, if you haven't joined Heal yet, look at haveempathyandlove.com. I'm always posting there, and there's more comments there. There's more community there and people talking about this book. So look forward to seeing you there. Take care, guys, and have a great day. Bye-bye.